Aloha, it's Uncle Hugh coming with more promises from Psalm 23, looking this time in video number 5 at verse 3. He leads me in paths of righteousness. Today I want to talk about paths. This psalm says paths of righteousness, but there are many paths in this life. You know, paths usually lead someplace. I'm going to use some pictures of different paths that I've had in my adventures traveling with the gospel around the world. Most paths lead to someplace, and they are going for a purpose, but not always. And the purpose isn't always the most interesting thing about the path, if we pay attention along, because all paths go through someplace too. So we're talking in these pictures about physical paths, but we also talk about paths of righteousness are the path of our life, our path leading through our life. Now, the purpose of this path for us was we were going to baptize some people in the ocean and going through these fish ponds next to the ocean on our way to baptize some people who wanted to be baptized on this day. But it turns out that the trip was much more interesting than the baptism itself. So all paths have a destination, our life path, as well as the paths we have in life or through life. We often go through some very, very interesting places, through and to, in our adventures, in paths that Jesus leads us. And we meet interesting people along the way. And not only along the way, but sometimes we have companions that go with us along the way. But not always. Sometimes the path seems long and very lonely. Sometimes seems like that, the paths that Jesus leads us in during this life with him. John 10:10 says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I, Jesus said, came that they might have life and have it abundantly. So the paths of righteousness in which he leads us are in abundant life and through and to abundant life. But the abundant life that he brings us doesn't always seem stable and secure to us. Sometimes it seems like a swaying bridge that is very unstable and feels very insecure. And sometimes the paths are physically downright dangerous also, as this path along the mountains. Now, when I read the psalm, he leads me in paths of righteousness, this picture is the one that comes up to me. A trail that switchbacks up along this steep mountain. And that's what I see when I read the psalm. What path do you see as you read, he leads me in paths of righteousness? Are these paths of righteousness for comfort? Well, I don't think so. In fact, one of my earliest lessons with the Lord was, I think that a comfortable Christian is probably in a very dangerous place. There are many different kinds of paths. On this path, this person is going home after a long day work in the fields in the mountains. Whereas we are taking these same paths, not to get home or to go to the fields for work, but just to get across the valley to visit somebody. So we have different purposes, going through different things or going through the same things, but with a different purpose in mind. But we know that the path that Jesus leads us on is a narrow one that leads to life, that abundant life. There are few who find it. So if you want to avoid these seemingly dangerous, maybe really dangerous paths, and settle for a safe, wide path, well, maybe that will not be the path that leads you to righteousness, leading you to eternal life and to abundant life. He leads me in paths of righteousness. When we read Colossians 3:23, we see a little bit more about what this might mean for us, because when we do it for the Lord, our purpose is not something that we have thought of. It's something that He has thought of. And it's not for our sake. It's not for our comfort. It's not for our benefit. It's for the purpose of doing it for God, His purpose. He leads me in paths of righteousness. It's always an adventure into and through righteousness that He leads us. 2 Corinthians 5:21, He made Him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf so that we might become the righteousness of God in Him. Of course, when we look at our lives, look in the mirror, it doesn't seem that we are righteous at all, most often. At least that's my experience. I don't seem like a very righteous person. But He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. There are many paths, but He promises that He will lead me in the path of righteousness, in paths of righteousness. Many different paths, many different kinds of paths. Of course, it's all conditional. The Lord is my shepherd. If the Lord is your shepherd, He will lead you in paths of righteousness as we follow His lead. How about it? Have you decided to follow Jesus, to enter into and follow the path of righteousness through which and over which He will lead you? It's an abundant life, a very, very adventurous life that I have enjoyed and gets better every year for me. Well, that's Psalm 23, another thing that I see in verse 3. Hope you enjoy. Until next time, God bless you richly.